are a lot of different blockchains, but the one which basically a lot of companies are using is Hyperledger. And Hyperledger, you know, is a member of the Linux Foundation, but it's a really complex world. Arnaud Le Hors is the member of the Technical Steering Committee, and he works also for IBM, and he is an ambassador. Can you tell us a little bit about this Hyperledger world? How many Hyperledgers are there?
So there is only one Hyperledger. Hyperledger is basically a consortium of industry players interested in developing blockchain technology for the enterprise around open source projects. So I have to correct you, I'm sorry, but Hyperledger technically is a collaborative project of the Linux Foundation. Yeah. The Linux Foundation is the host organization, and Hyperledger is essentially a consortium. So you often hear people say, oh, we are using Hyperledger. It doesn't really mean anything because that's an organization. You cannot use an organization for your solution. On the other hand, what happens is, so basically the Hyperledger organization is hosting several open source projects, each of which develop different pieces of blockchain-related technologies. Yeah. So there are actually currently 5 different frameworks you can use to develop blockchain solutions with. One of which is Hyperledger Fabric, which was initially contributed by IBM and Digital Assets. There's another one called Sawtooth, which was primarily contributed by Intel, which has different characteristics, but there are more. There is Hyperledger Iroha, there is Indy, there is Bureau, so the list goes on. And so you can see that, you know, we have a fairly
and we have different focuses. One is for IoT, and one is for identity, and one is for more general blockchain applications for the corporates.
That's right. In fact, I mean, as you probably know, blockchain is still a fairly young technology, and so there's a lot of innovation, exploration, and Hyperledger very much wants to encourage this. We want people to explore, and there are different technical possibilities. Each solution has its pros and cons, and so we're still so early on that it doesn't make sense to constrain yourself to one particular set of choices. No. So we have these different explorations that are going on, and people make different choices, and there are different trade-offs.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about these 5 because I want to have a little bit of a characterization of these 5 platforms. If we talk about Fabric, which I hear the most about in Europe. What is the characteristic of that platform, of that open source platform?
All right, so Fabric is written in Go, and it has one of the primary goals was really to be broadly applicable across many different industry applications. It is for permission networks, so you actually control who the participants are in the network. Yeah. And so it has, you know, it uses smart contract technologies that can be written in different languages, including Go, but Node.js or Java, and it's extensible. Yep. And so it has its own new types of consensus mechanism that's quite different from what you see in other systems. We do not use like proof of work, which is well known for, you know, consuming so much energy. So we have much higher throughput. We have finality of transaction, which is different from other systems. So there's a set of characteristics like this that makes it different.
Okay. And then is there always another instance? If you do a new project, do you have a new instance from the blockchain, or is there also an open version, a public version of it?
So that's a very good point. Hyperledger, all the different projects, they really are software for you to use to develop your own blockchain network. So there is no Hyperledger blockchain network of any kind. And we're not in the business of doing that. I don't expect us to change that. So there isn't like a Fabric network you can join. You would have to join some industry organization that has actually developed a network like we have in Food Trust or, you know.
So it is basically you start your own instance and you take the code of that moment, and it's not automatically updated. It's not automatically updated at every project.
That is correct.
Okay. So that's one. Then what is the second biggest interesting one?
So Sawtooth, as I was saying, so it's a different architecture. It's both permission and permissionless. They can accommodate both. The key differentiator is, so Intel came up with this notion called proof of elapsed time. The idea is to say, well, the proof of work that is used in many blockchain systems, fundamentally, they're all about making you spend time to validate transactions, so it would be too costly to rewrite history. And so it becomes practically impossible, because as you're trying to rewrite history, the world keeps on going, creating new blocks. So you cannot actually catch up.
Okay.
Intel's idea was to say, well, what if we could guarantee that people are waiting, spending time, without actually consuming energy, without doing this kind of cryptographic challenge that we have in Bitcoin. So they came up with this notion of proof of elapsed time that relies on a secure enclave. It's depending on hardware that basically gives you a timestamp guaranteeing that you are waiting a certain amount of time. And everything
is that useful for particular solutions like IoT? Is that the Intel link, or is it also a general-based blockchain solution?
Yeah, it's a general blockchain solution. From that point of view, it has similar characteristics and or goals as Fabric.
Then there was a third one which had something to do with identity.
So Hyperledger Indy was contributed by the Sovereign Foundation, and it's a purposely built framework for managing self-sovereign identity. It's a fascinating space where they use blockchain as the backbone to verify credentials associated with people's identity, where people are put in control of their identity-related information.
Extremely useful. And is that public or open, or is that closed?
So Hyperledger Indy, again, is the software, so that's completely open. Anybody can join and participate, and you can take it and deploy your own instance.
Okay, so there's a lot of different identity solutions based on, but they don't talk to each other, they're all separate.
Well, we'll see. So the Sovereign Foundation is running one instance, okay, of Hyperledger Indy. So you can join.
Permission-based or not?
Yes, so it's permission. They have two different levels of access. Anybody can have read access to it. On the other end, to write to the chain, you have to have access permissioned. Okay. So it's a public permission network, which is kind of original in and of itself. Yeah. It's not that common.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's say that that's enough for the time being. How would you position that Hyperledger is doing compared to all the other blockchain 3.0 solutions are slowly coming up, the EOS or the Cardano, or the how well is it behaving as a platform, as a consortium, and how fast is the technology developing?
So I think it's a tremendous success so far, and the Linux Foundation, which is hosting many other similar projects in other areas like cloud, right? They've never seen such a momentum. The organization started just 2.5 years ago, and we are over 250 members. And what I find especially interesting, I'm an IT person, I've worked in standards and open source for all my career now, and I'm used to work with other IT vendors. It's the Oracle guys, the Microsoft guys, I'm IBM, so this is the same people you cannot find around. But here, we have a very broad set of members that come from very different backgrounds, and there's a lot of people who are more on the user end of the spectrum because they see that blockchain is revolutionary in and of itself, and they want to understand what it is, and they become members to support the development of this technology. So, the Linux Foundation keeps issuing press releases with a whole new bunch of members, like on a monthly basis.
So it's a really nice environment. Hey, what does the IT steering committee do?
No, the technical steering committee basically is responsible for overseeing the technical direction of the organization as a whole. So we have a process. If you want to start a new project, maybe you have yet another framework that you've been working on that you would like to develop within the open, in the context of the Hyperledger. And so you will come to the technical steering committee and make a proposal to launch a new project.
Okay, my question to you then. When are you going to launch a public blockchain, a general Hyperledger, open, public, permissionless blockchain, which basically can run a lot of different processes?
So it's not in the card for now. I cannot speak for, I think...
Well, is there an initiative coming? Don't people talk about it? Because everybody does individual things now, but we'd like to have a nice, fast-moving public blockchain which can do a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint you. At this point in time, I'm not aware of anybody having such plans for Hyperledger.
Okay, but you're doing a huge amount of projects nowadays, right? A lot of people are doing Hyperledger projects all around the world. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of them, right? So there's a lot of instances.
Yes, absolutely. IBM alone has over 400 customer engagements around this, right?
And Intel and even Oracle and all these people.
Absolutely, everybody. And now Fabric is hosted on Azure, on AWS, Oracle Cloud. Yeah. So yes, but so that's great. There's huge momentum.
And a lot of practical blockchain cases come from the Hyperledger solution. Thank you very much, Arnaud from IBM, member of the Technical Steering Committee.